Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'll be doing chemistry paper 2-2, a May June series 2022. This paper is 45 minutes and there is 40 questions, so there will be 40 marks. Let's go. So, question 1. Which two gases will diffuse at the same rate at the same temperature? Right, so whenever two gases need to diffuse at the same rate, when you have the same temperature, their MR has to be the same. So therefore, which two molecules have the same MR? The answer is B, because the MR of carbon monoxide is 28. MR of nitrogen is also 28. Okay. Question 2. A student measures the time taken for 2 grams of magnesium to dissolve in 50 cm3 of dilute sulfuric acid. Which apparatus is essential to complete the experiment? Right, so firstly, the question says that you're measuring the time taken. So obviously, when you're measuring time, you need a stop clock. Okay. Next, 2 grams of magnesium. You need to measure out 2 grams. So how do you measure out a solid mass? Using a balance. Okay. To dissolve 50 cm3 of dilute sulfuric acid. So how do you measure 50 cm3 of dilute sulfuric acid? You use a measuring cylinder. So therefore, the essential apparatus is 1, 2, and 4. The answer is A. Okay. Now, 3. A chromatogram of a single substance T is shown. Which measurements are used to find the RF value of T? Okay, so how do you find RF? RF is distance traveled by solute over the distance traveled by solvent front. Okay, so if you put your mark here on the baseline, the distance traveled by solute would be this distance, right, from the mark to the print here. And the distance traveled by solvent front would be from the baseline to the solvent front here. So therefore, which measurements are used to find the RF value would be 3 and 4. Okay, these two. Answer is D. Question 4. X and Y are two different elements. X and Y have the same number of nucleons. Which statement about X and Y is correct? So, firstly, they are two different elements. So therefore, they also have the same number of nucleons. Okay, so nucleons is protons and neutrons. Neutrons. Okay, so they have two different elements, so therefore they cannot have the same physical properties. Their atoms have the same number of electrons. That's incorrect because they have two different elements and they have two different proton numbers. They didn't say anything about electrons. They are in different groups of the periodic table. That is true. Okay, they can be in different groups of the periodic table. They have different relative masses. That's incorrect because protons and neutrons determine the mass of the element. So if they have the same number of nucleons, they cannot have different relative masses. So therefore, D is wrong. The answer is C. Okay. The diagram shows the structure of 3 macromolecules, P, Q, and R. What are P, Q, and R? Okay, so if we see in this diagram, in P, molecule P, there's two different elements being used. There's the black circle and the gray circle. So there's two different elements. Okay, but in Q and R, all of the atoms are the same. So it's one element, right? Yeah, it's one element. So therefore, naturally, since you know diamond and graphite are both made of carbon, P has to be silicon oxide because it's the only molecule here that has two different elements. So therefore A and B is wrong. Okay, so it's either C or D. So next, which of Q and R is diamond? So diamond is in a tetrahedral structure. Okay, so a tetrahedral structure looks like this one. This is a tetrahedral structure. So a diamond molecule looks like this. Okay, next, but then a graphite molecule would look like R, because in graphite they have many layers. Okay, they have layers connected by weak van der Waals forces. Okay, therefore, in this question, the answer is C. Okay, P is silicon oxide, Q is diamond, R is graphite. Which dot and cross diagram shows the arrangement of outer shell electrons in a molecule hydrogen chloride? Right. So firstly, they want outer shell electrons. So hydrogen has 1 outer shell electron, chlorine has 7. Hydrogen equals 1, chlorine equals 7. Okay, so let's see which is correct. So it cannot be C because it shows the bond but it doesn't show the lone pairs of chlorine, right? It cannot be D because chlorine must be the one with 7 electrons, hydrogen must be 1. In this case, it's flipped around, so it's wrong. It cannot be D, cannot be C. In this scenario, hydrogen has outer shell of 8 electrons, which is wrong because hydrogen's outer shell can only hold 2 electrons, right? So this is wrong. So A has to be the answer because chlorine has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 electrons, hydrogen has 1, and each of them have a full outer shell. Okay, so answer is A. The equation for the reaction between barium chloride and dilute sulfuric acid is shown. Which row shows the state symbols for this equation? Okay, so barium chloride is soluble, so it's aqueous. H2SO4 will also be aqueous. However, barium sulfate is not aqueous, it's a solid, it will be a precipitation, right? And since these two are aqueous, HCl also has to be aqueous. Therefore, the answer is A. Question 8. Methane and steam react in the presence of a catalyst. 0.5 moles of methane reacts completely with 0.5 moles of steam. What is the volume of carbon monoxide and hydrogen produced measured at room temperature and pressure? Okay, so at room temperature and pressure, 24 dm cube of a gas is 1 mole. Okay, so in this equation, you're reacting 0.5 moles of methane with 0.5 moles of steam, which is H2O gas. Okay, so what volume of carbon monoxide will be produced? Since 0.5 moles is reacting with 0.5 moles, carbon monoxide will also be 0.5 moles. Okay, but hydrogen would be 1.5 moles because it's 3 times of carbon monoxide. Okay, so you just need to take this 0.5 moles times 24, which is 12, to get the volume of carbon monoxide at room temperature. And you do the same thing for hydrogen, which is 1.5 times 24 equals 36. So therefore your answer is D. Okay. A compound of element X has a formula X2O and a relative formula mass of 44. What is element X? So this one you just need to use the periodic table. So X2O equals 144. Okay, so X2, X2 must be 144 minus 16, okay, which is 134 minus 6, 128. So X2 equals 128. So therefore your X must equal to 64. So which element has a mass of 64? Copper. The diagram shows the electrolysis of concentrated hydrochloric acid and concentrated aqueous sodium chloride using carbon electrodes. At which electrode is hydrogen produced? Okay, so firstly, you need to know that a hydrogen ion is positively charged. It will be H+, right? So a positively charged ion will be attracted to the negative electrode, which is the cathode, right? So therefore, A and B is wrong because hydrogen will never be produced at an anode, right? It cannot be produced at the positive sign. Okay, so next, you know that. Okay, so we from the answers left here, we know that hydrogen will 100% be produced at electrode 2. So let's see if it's produced at electrode 4. So whenever you electrolyze concentrated aqueous sodium chloride, also known as brine, you will get chlorine at the anode, hydrogen at the cathode, and you'll be left with NaOH. Okay, therefore, at which electrodes is hydrogen produced? 2 and 4. Answer is D. Okay. 11. Which diagram shows the electrolysis of aqueous copper sulfate using inert electrodes? Which arrow shows the movement of electrons in the circuit? Okay, so in the circuit, if it wants movement of electrons in the circuit, C and D cannot be the answer because it's in the electrolyte. Right? It's not part of the circuit. So, movement of electrons. So the cathode is negative, the anode is positive. So therefore, since the cathode is negative, the electrons has to be going into the cathode. So the answer is B. Since electrons are negatively charged, the electrons move into the cathode, which makes the cathode negatively charged. Okay. 12. Which row identifies a chemical change and a physical change? Chemical change would be a change on the composition, right? So a physical change would be a change in state. Okay, so this one, chemical change involves the intramolecular, right? Physical change involves intermolecular. So physical change involves between molecules. Chemical change is within the molecule. Okay, so which of this change is within the molecule? It's not A because boiling is a physical change. Burning can be an answer. Evaporating, not an answer. Dissolving ethanol in water, that is not an answer. So therefore, the only answer actually is B. 12. Right? You don't even need to look at the physical change for this one. Which statements explain why increasing the concentration of a reactant increases the rate of reaction? Okay, so increases the collision rate of particles. That is true because you're adding more particles, so therefore there will be more collisions. It lowers the activation energy. That is not true. This is because there's no catalyst, right? Lowering activation energy can only be done by a catalyst. A greater proportion of colliding molecules have the required activation energy. That's not correct. You're adding more molecules. You're not increasing the energy of the molecules, right? So this would actually be because of temperature, not concentration. Okay? There are more particles per unit volume. That's correct because you're adding more particles when you increase the concentration. So therefore the answer is B. When the colorless gas N2O4 is heated, it forms the brown gas NO2. When the reaction mixture is cooled, the brown color fades and turns back to colorless. Which type of reaction is described by these observations? Okay, so initially, if you heat it, it forms a brown gas. Okay, so N2O4, it will form a brown gas NO2. Okay, but when you cool it down, so this is heating, right? But then when you cool it down, the brown color fades and turns back to colorless. So initially it's colorless. You heat it, it will turn brown, but if you cool it back, it will turn back to colorless. So therefore, the only reaction that kind of goes in this way would be a reversible reaction. Okay? B. Water is added to anhydrous copper sulfate. What happens during the reaction? Okay, so anhydrous copper sulfate is white. So when you add water, it will turn blue, right? Therefore C and D is wrong. Okay, and when you add water, it's actually an exothermic reaction. Therefore, the answer is B because the solution form will get hotter. Okay, which arrow on the energy level diagram shows the overall energy change for an endothermic reaction? Okay, so whenever a reaction is endothermic, the products will have more energy than the reactants. So the overall energy change would be the difference between the products and the reactions, right? In this case, A is wrong because that's activation energy, right? C is wrong because it's activation energy minus B or D, so this cannot be the answer. So overall energy change is the delta H, so you want the energy difference. So it's either B or D, right? So we know that for the energy change for an endothermic reaction is positive, right? In an exothermic, it will be negative, but since it's endothermic, it's positive. So if it's positive, the arrow has to be pointing upwards from the reactants to the products. So the answer is B, right? D would mean that it's negative, so this is wrong. Okay. When a hydrogen-oxygen fuel cell is in operation, a different reaction happens at each electrode. Okay. The electrons that are lost at a hydrogen electrode travel through the external circuit to the oxygen electrode, where they are gained by oxygen and water. Operated for a period of time and 4 moles of oxygen molecules are consumed. Which mass of hydrogen is consumed? So in this scenario, you need to look at the two equations. So since you are using 4 moles of oxygen molecules, which requires 4 electrons, you need to consume 8 moles of hydrogen, because for every mole of oxygen, you need 2 moles of hydrogen to account for the electrons that oxygen needs. So therefore, if you react 4 moles of oxygen or consume 4 moles of oxygen, you also need to consume 8 moles of hydrogen. So therefore, how to find mass? You use the mass over mole times mR. You use this triangle, right? So to find mass, you take mole times mR. Okay, so in this scenario, the mole would be 8 moles of hydrogen times the mR, which is 2, right? You get 16. So therefore the answer is D. Okay. The solutions of two elements, X and Y, are separately dissolved in water and the pH of each solution is tested. Which information about X and Y is correct? So pH of solution 1, so that means the 1 is acidic, right? So that means X is acidic, so therefore C and D is wrong. It's basic. Okay, so metal or non-metal? So the non-metal oxide would be acidic, so therefore the answer is B. Okay. An acid is neutralized by adding an excess of an insoluble solid base. A soluble salt is formed. How is the pure salt obtained from the reaction mixture? So since you add an excess, you first need to undergo filtration to remove the excess. Okay, therefore A and B is wrong. And a soluble salt is formed, and you want to obtain the pure salt. So first you need to evaporate the mixture, then only you crystallize it. Okay. Substance J takes part in a redox reaction. In the reaction, J gains electrons. Which statement is correct? So, it's talking about redox. So, oxidation is loss, reduction is gain. So, it gains electrons, so J is reduced. Okay. So, the compound that is reduced is the oxidizing agent. All oxidizing agents would be reduced. Okay. So if it's a reducing agent, it will be oxidized. But in this case, J is the oxidizing agent because it is reduced in the reaction. So the answer is B. Okay. Elements in group 4 of the periodic table are shown. What does not occur in group 4 as is descended? The proton number of the elements increases. That is true, but they want what does not occur. So A is not the answer. The elements become more metallic. That is also true, but it's not what you want, so B is wrong. The elements have more electrons in their outer shell. Now this is the answer because this does not happen in group 4. As you descend, the outer shell will always have 4 electrons because it's in group 4. Okay? Which statement about acids is correct? Acids are proton acceptors. This is wrong because acids are proton donors. Okay? Acids transfer electron to bases in aqueous solution. This is wrong. Hydrochloric acid reacts with ammonium hydroxide to produce ammonia. Okay, this is wrong also. It doesn't produce ammonia. Ethanoic acid partially ionizes in aqueous solution. This is the answer because ethanoic acid is a weak acid, and weak acid partially ionizes in aqueous solutions. which elements have both a high melting point and variable oxidation states? So variable oxidation states means it must be a transition metal or transition element to be more specific. Okay, so therefore the answer is B. Lithium, sodium, and potassium are elements in group 1 of the periodic table. Chromium, bromine, and chlorine, bromine, and iodine are elements in group 7. Which row identifies the least dense of these elements in each group? Okay, so in group 1, as you go down, it will be more dense. So therefore, in group 1, the least dense will be lithium. Okay, so therefore C and D is wrong. And between chlorine and iodine, which is less dense, is chlorine. Okay, because as you go down, group 7, the density increases also. So the answer is A. The reactions of metals P, Q, R, and S are shown. What is the order reactivity of the metals? Okay, so for this question, let's see A. The least reactive would be P, right? P would be a least reactive because it doesn't react with water and it doesn't react with hydrochloric acid, right? So therefore, automatically is the least reactive. Okay, so least reactive has to be P. Okay, so followed by so next is between Q and S, which is more reactive or which is less reactive. Let's see. So reaction with water, very slow compared to slow. Okay, so if you react slower with water, you are therefore least reactive, right? You are less reactive if you react slower with water. So therefore 25 is A. Okay, so P, S, Q, R. The number of protons and number of neutrons in atom element X, Y, and Z are shown. Which statement about the elements is correct? Okay, so X and Y are isotopes of the same element. This is wrong because in order to be the same element, they must have the same proton number. But X has 6, Y has 7, so therefore A is not correct. Z forms an ions with a +2 charge. Okay, so number of protons is 8, so it will have 2 on the inside and 6 on the outside. Okay, so therefore it doesn't form an ion with a +2 charge. It will form an ion with a -2 charge because it needs 2 electrons to fill its outer shell. Okay, so therefore B is wrong. C, X and Z react together to form an ionic compound. Okay, so X and Z to form ionic compound. This is not correct because they are both non-metals, right? Ionic compound must be between a metal and non-metal. Okay, but X and Z are both non-metals. So finally, X, Y, and Z are non-metals. That is correct. Okay, that's the answer. Which diagram represents the arrangement of atoms in an alloy? Okay, so A is not correct because in an alloy is a mixture. Alloys are mixtures. Okay, the two elements don't react together. They are just in a mixture, a solid mixture. Okay, B is incorrect because there's only one type of atom or element, right? C is also incorrect because there's only one type of atom, right? And D is the answer because there's 2 types of atoms and they are in a solid-like structure. Okay. 28. 3 metal compounds JKL are heated using a Bunsen burner. Colorless gas produced which relights a glowing spin. So this is oxygen. Right? This is the test for oxygen. Colorless gas produced which turns lime water milky. So this is test for carbon dioxide. And L is no reaction. Okay, so this is upon heating. So which row identifies J, K, and L? So right. So firstly, when you heat a carbonate, you will produce carbon dioxide, right? If you heat a nitrate, you will produce oxygen. So therefore, J has to be potassium nitrate, right? A and B is wrong. And finally, between potassium carbonate and magnesium carbonate, which of these would have no reaction when you heat it up? Answer is potassium carbonate, right? L would be potassium carbonate, K is magnesium carbonate. Magnesium carbonate will release CO2, potassium carbonate will have no reaction. Therefore, answer is C. Processes involved in the extraction of zinc are listed. In which order are the processes carried out? So, okay, so first, obviously, you have to start with the zinc ore. So therefore, this the fourth process would be the number 1. This is the first thing that happens. Therefore, A and D are wrong. Okay. So next would be heating the zinc oxide with carbon. So this is the redox reaction, right? So this is second. Next is you need to vaporize the zinc, followed by condensation. Okay. So therefore, the answer is 4, 1, 3, 2. Answer is C. Okay. 30. Which process uses sacrificial protection to prevent steel from rusting? This is simply galvanizing. Okay. You're basically coating the steel with a more reactive element or metal like zinc, right? So that the zinc corrodes instead of the steel. Okay. Fertilizers are used to provide 3 of the elements needed for plant growth. Which 2 compounds will give a fertilizer containing all 3 of these elements? So firstly, you need to know what these 3 elements are. It's N, P, and K, right? Nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. So which of these contains all 3 of these? You just need to look at the compounds. So very simply, the answer is K. The answer is D because it has K, N, and P. Okay. Next, which processes produce carbon dioxide? So respiration produces carbon dioxide, right? Releases CO2 plus water. Photosynthesis uses carbon dioxide, so it doesn't produce carbon dioxide. Fermentation does produce carbon dioxide, right? Because fermentation is basically just anaerobic respiration. Okay, it's also respiration but without oxygen. Combustion of hydrogen doesn't produce carbon dioxide. Okay, so out of these 4, only 1 and 3 will produce carbon dioxide. The answer is A. Which reaction in the contact process requires the use of the catalyst? So it should be quite simple. The contact process that requires the catalyst is this one, right? 33. Because this one is the one where you need the 450 degrees Celsius. You need the vanadium oxide catalyst, right? And then this process is the reversible one that you need to use the catalyst. Okay. What are the products when limestone is heated strongly? So when you heat calcium carbonate strongly, you will get calcium oxide and carbon dioxide. Structure of ester W is shown. Which row gives the name of ester W and the carboxylic acid and alcohol from which it's made? So first, let's name the ester. So the carbon connected to the single bond O without the double bond, this will be the alcohol part, right? So therefore, the alcohol part goes in front. So this, since it's 1 carbon, it will be methyl, right? So it will be methyl ethanoate because if you cut it here, right? This is the ester bond. So if you cut the ester bond, this part is the alcohol, this part is the acid. Okay? So when you're naming an ester, the alcohol part must be in front. So it will be the alcohol il and then the acid O8. Okay? So in this scenario, there's 1 carbon on the alcohol part, so it will be meth. and there's 2 carbon on the acid part, so it'll be eth. So it'll be methyl ethanoate. So it's between C or D, right? And since you know how to name the ester, the carboxylic acid, and the alcohol used, should be quite easy to tell. Since this is a 2 carbon acid you're using, it's ethanoic acid. Since it's a 1 carbon alcohol you're using, it'll be methanol. So the answer is C. Ethene reacts with substance X to form ethanol. So what is X? So to form ethanol from ethene, right? So this is what ethene looks like. And this is what ethanol looks like. So as you can see, the difference is you have added 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen. So what has 2 hydrogen and 1 oxygen? Water has 2 hydrogen and 1 oxygen. So therefore, what is X? X is steam. Okay, it's water. So you need to add water to break the double bond. You add the OH and the H on this side. Okay. Alkenes can be produced by cracking large hydrocarbon molecules to form smaller hydrocarbon molecules. Which equations represent possible reactions when tetradecane is cracked? Okay, so when cracking, you need to know that number of carbon of all the compounds and the number of hydrogen in all of the compounds must be the same as the initial hydrocarbon that you are cracking. Okay, so in this case, let's see. In this in equation 1, there's 14 carbons. So let's see, 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5. So that is 14. That's correct. So let's see, 30 hydrogen. 6 plus 6, 12, 12 plus 8, 20, 20 plus 10, 30. So therefore, this is possible. Question for equation 2. Let's see. 14 carbons, so 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5, which is 14. So that's correct. 30 hydrogen, so 2 plus 4, 6, 6 plus 6, 12, 12 plus 8, 20, 20 plus 10 is 30. So therefore, 2 can also be an answer. 3, okay, so 2 plus 4 times 3. So 12 plus 2 equals 14, so that's correct. 6 times 4 is 24, plus 6 is 30, so 3 can also be an answer. And finally 4, 2 plus 3 plus 9, so 12, 13, 14. So the number of carbon is correct, but in this case, the number of hydrogen is 32. The total number of hydrogen is 32 instead of 30, so 4 cannot be an answer. Okay, so whenever you do cracking, you just need to make sure the number of carbons in the products is the same as the number of carbon in the reaction, and the number of hydrogen in the products must also be the same as the number of hydrogen in the reactants. Okay, so answer is C, 1, 2, and 3. The structures of some hydrocarbons are shown. Which statement about hydrocarbons is correct? So 1, 2 have different general formula. So that's wrong because they are both alkanes, so they will have the same general formula. 1 and 4 are in different homologous series. That is also wrong. They are all alkanes. 1 and 4 are both alkanes. So therefore, they are in the same homologous series. Okay. 2 and 3 are structural isomers. That is incorrect because 2 and 3 is the same thing. It doesn't matter how you draw out these two, right? It may look different, but it's actually the same thing. Because if you bring this part, if you bring it up, right, it's actually just the same thing. Okay? Because these molecules are they can be rotated, right? The bonds can be rotated, they can move around each other. So 2 and 3 are the same thing, they are not different. So therefore they are not structural isomers. Okay? 3 and 4 have the same empirical formula. That is true. They have the same empirical formula because they have the same amount of carbons, they have the same amount of hydrogen, so therefore they will have the same empirical formula. Okay? 39. Ethane reacts with chlorine in the presence of UV light. Which substances are produced in this reaction? Okay? So, ethane reacts with chlorine. So, ethane. This is what ethane looks like. Okay, when you react with chlorine, you replace one hydrogen with chlorine. Okay, and this process can be repeated with all of these hydrogens, right? So the first time you substitute the hydrogen with chlorine, you will get H2, which is you'll get number 2, which is correct. If you substitute again, you can get number 3, which is also correct. And you will also get number 4 because the substituted hydrogen will react with chlorine in the air. Okay? Therefore, 2 and 3 and 4 is the answer. 1 cannot be formed because it will form number 4 instead. So 1 is not formed. Okay? Which polymer structure has the same linkages as terylene? Okay, so terylene is a polyester. So which of these has an ester bond? A doesn't have an ester bond. C doesn't have an ester bond, it's an amide bond. D doesn't have an ester bond, right? The only one with an ester bond, which is the COO, this ester bond, is B, right? Because C, if you draw this out continuing, you will have the O here, and with the C, CH3, C, CH3, H. You'll continue on like that. So therefore, the only answer is B. So B is the answer. Okay, so that's it for this paper. If you liked it, please like and subscribe. I'll see you all next time.